Hi, Chris Mc Loone here with Fire Apparatus and Emergency Equipment. Welcome to this episode of our podcast. As you can see, I have Ricky Riley and Nick Wilbur here with me today, two mainstays on our podcast here today. You know, to jump right into it, we're going to talk about the importance of making sure you've got your rig all spec'd and ready to go before, I shouldn't say spec'd and ready to go, but all figured out and all nailed down, tightened up, buttoned up, before you even go to the engineering conference. This is something that Ricky brought up to me a few weeks ago, and I said, "Well, we have to get this on the podcast." And he suggested bringing Nick along. So, guys, thank you very much for joining me today. When we talk about specifications, and we had a long discussion about this at our advisory board meeting about, you know, whether people are writing their specs anymore and how much attention they're paying to NFPA 1900 in terms of getting all that squared away. But we also had Bill Adams at that meeting, and Bill for years has talked about how if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. And that's one aspect of it. But you know, there are other pieces to this where, you know, like if you leave too much to the manufacturer, you know, what you see at the final inspection might not be quite what you expected to find. Plus, in today's apparatus purchasing environment, making sure you are all squared away before you even get to the engineering conference is paramount. So, guys, before we get started, or as we get started, I guess, real quick, just talk to me about, in your mind, I'll start with you, Ricky. What do you mean when you talk about making sure everything is squared away before the engineering conference? Because that could mean different things to different people.
Yeah, and, you know, it'll be, you know, obviously that's why we wanted Nick on to get a different perspective because, you know, I deal with my municipality and how we do business. And then obviously Nick will be able to provide some of the stuff that he does, you know, with his part-time business. Then obviously he has a municipality that I think shares a lot of the same problems that I have when we go about ordering apparatus. Is that, look, so the process is still the same. You know, you get money, you know, you either put out specifications, you don't, you buy off an HGAC contract or a consortium, and then you buy the rig and you have your specification set. But, you know, and you go to engineering and then you go to midpoint, then you go to final. Is that I think the biggest thing that's changing for me, at least, is that at the engineering conference, I don't want to change anything anymore. I don't want to change a light. I don't want to change any compartments. It used to be, you know, prior to this, what's going on in the industry now, which has been unprecedented the last couple of years, is that, you know, you kind of go to an engineering conference and that's, you know, 6 months, 7 months after you know, written the check or signed the contract. And then everybody, you know, your whole team gets together and then, oh, we want to change this compartment door. We want to change this body. We want to change this. We want to change that. And it really did not affect the bottom line as we moved along with a midpoint or the final. And I think now, and, you know, Nick probably has a lot more experience with a lot more different manufacturers than I do, because I only deal in like 2 or 3 of them, is that, you know, anything that you change now in engineering could have an effect on your, you know, your final delivery date or your, you know, ready for pickup date. And I don't want to have that anymore. I don't want to, I think the pickup dates and the midpoints and everything are so frail that anytime that you make any kind of change, you're subject to, you know, extending that out, drawing it out, or, you know, gosh forbid, if you make a big change, that they're just going to say, hey, look, we're going to put you back in queue and we're going to re-engineer it again. And oh my God, after waiting, you know, a year, 2 years for an engineering conference to get there and go, what do you mean I'm going back in queue? You know, so, I mean, I think it's paramount now for the purchaser and then your salesperson to have that buttoned down tight of what you want to do. And look, hey, we're going to send 5 or 6 people out for this committee. But look, we're not going to change a whole lot. You know, if you want to change a light and move it here to there, that's probably not a big deal for any manufacturer. But to go ahead and make wholesale changes on your apparatus is crucial. So, I mean, I have a customer that I'm dealing with in Delaware that, you know, so, and Nick, please relate to this is that, hey, look, we got money and hey, we want to buy the rig. And then all of a sudden there's a price increase coming up. So,
Yep.
And it seems like everybody gets money right around the time that the manufacturers go, hey, look, we're going to do a price increase and it's going to be this day. And, in previous podcasts or, webinars, I've told them, look, if you get money, buy it today. Just get it, buy it, get it on the books,
Right.
don't get close to that, price increase. But now is the time is that, we probably threw this together or we threw a specification together, Nick probably threw a specification together and then we threw it to the fire department. Here's the number that the salesperson and the manufacturer gave us back. And then we go, all right, now we got to tighten it up. We needed a 12-volt drop in this compartment and we need a shelf here. But all that needs to be done ahead of time. So Nick, I'll let you, you go through some of your experience and I'll stop for a second because this is a soapbox item for me. So.
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100% everything you're talking about. And, we come into that price increase and everyone starts kind of losing their mind. And I think the hard part to kind of put in perspective is you're exactly right. And with the money and how it's going to change and timing, we looked in Arlington to buy a couple ladder trucks, and there was talks from going from the 107 to 105, right? Kind of version. One was steel, one was the newer steel. And, we like the old version, we like the new version, whatever, right? There was talks back and forth. You go to the manufacturer after we sign contract and they're like, yeah, you changed that one item. You're back on the front of the line. And 3.5 years later, you'll see your fire truck from today. Right. And so we're already 2 years into this process and we can't afford that change. So conversations we should have had months ago, years ago, right, we're trying to have today. And it's really not even a conversation to have. On the other side of that, right, the money side, you go and you rush the contract, right? There's a price increase, let's say next month, and we're trying to throw this fire truck together. We don't get all the finite details down and we just rush to sign contract. Everyone thinks that's saving some money, but depending on the manufacturer, that pre-engineering conference can be 2 years from now. Well, in that 2 years, there's 6 or 7 more price increases. So when you go in there and you go to pre-engineering, now when you're taking, subtracting, and adding, what you're subtracting out, you're getting pennies on the dollar for. And what you're trying to add is now twice as much as it would have been when you went to sign that contract. So there's a big disparity there. We actually had a customer that when we were in pre-engineering, we're trying to downgrade an axle. They re-looked at the equipment they're going to carry. They upgraded some equipment over time, so their weight dropped down. So we're like, oh, we can downgrade this axle for a better ride, right? It was actually more expensive to downgrade an axle, even though the axle is cheaper. By the time we got to pre-engineering, it's already more money because the times have changed. And it's kind of down the middle. There's 2 schools of thought with that pre-engineering side. There's some that you sign contract and within a month or two, 6 to 8 weeks, you're going to pre-engineering regardless. And then you wait that 3-year time frame to get your fire truck and go to final and midpoint and things like that. Other manufacturers are looking to say, hey, you sign your contract today. Don't even reach out for the next 1.5, 2 years because we don't even want to talk to you, right? We got your signed contract. We got your money. No changes until we go to pre-engineering. And there's been a lot of adjustments. And Ricky, you can probably talk to it a day by day, right? Sometimes they'll open it up and talk to you. Sometimes they won't. Again, these unprecedented times, there's really no playbook to play by or really history to look at as to how this needs to be dealt with. And then on the other side of the money coin, there's manufacturers coming back and asking for more money even after a contract signed. And that final pricing that we used to see when you sign a contract for a fire truck is almost gone now. It's tied to some sort of consumer price index, or it's tied to some sort of vague writing on this is the estimated cost or something like that out there. So from a municipality budgeting money, it becomes very, very difficult. And it's forcing them to put so much money in there. I remember the days when I first got onto the Arlington Apparatus Committee, they're like, oh, we're going to put all these items on there, multiplex system and TAC 4 suspension. We go to pre-engineering and you just start slashing away these items, and that gets your pot of money you can work with to go in pre-engineering. That is not a thing anymore. You slash those items away, you're still going to owe money. Like you don't actually get any money back. The greatest example of that was we were in a Preengineering conference for a tower for Arlington, and it's going to get delivered here in August. And during the Preengineering conference, we wanted to change the lights. We went from a rear mount to a mid mount, the lights from an angle to just straight on. And so it was like a 30-degree change in the lights. And they were going to charge us $5,000 to do that. And it was because as soon as you went in that system and you changed that, the pricing for what it was to angle those lights a certain way from then to today, the computer system is what it is, and it changed it, and they want to charge money. We had a conversation and worked it out. But that's how important it is that when you sit down at a pre-engineering meeting, any change you make is going to cost you a lot of money. And again, your only negotiating power is before you sign that contract. Once that ink hits that paper, they own you. They got all the rights. And at a 2-year mark of waiting for a fire truck, they got you really good because now time's on their side. Hey, do you want this fire truck? Well, you're 1 year away from getting your fire truck, or you can start again and now you're 3 years away from getting a fire truck. That's a pretty big bargaining power.
So I've got a couple of questions for you guys based on what you just talked about. But before I do that, Nick, would you just quickly give a review of the process for some who may just be getting into the apparatus spec side of things or are new on apparatus committees? Just talk about the process of building the rig from pre-conference to final inspection.
Yeah, we'll even talk maybe a little bit before that pre-conference, right? So first is identifying need, right? Next thing that's the most important is identifying the budget, because you can't even really go out to bid and really talk about who you're going to ask to come in and bid or who you want to look at for a fire truck or what type of fire truck you might even get without talking budget, right? You can't go and buy a tiller truck on an engine's budget. It's just not, doesn't matter what manufacturer you go to, it's just not going to happen, right? So once you kind of get those things together, you get the committee together, get some heads together, and you start talking about, the way that this kind of process is going to go for your company and the budget and the money you have to work with. Then you kind of work with either a set manufacturer, go through, like Ricky was talking about, that consortium, either HGAC, Sourcewell, any of them, or you go out to that competitive bid, or you just say, hey, listen, this is the manufacturer we want to go with, and we're going to go with them. You start having those conversations. The work is just beginning. You got to go through a ton of work to get this spec together. And when you sign that dotted line, it's back and forth with the manufacturer and the sales force there to get your truck where you want it to get to. Once you're happy and you're confident that this is what it needs to be, right? Again, all the shelving is where it needs to be. Your complement of ground ladders, of hose, of whatever you're speccing is where it needs to be. Your weights are okay. The weight review is good. Then we're going to sign that contract. And then you kind of take that deep breath of relief that, we're kind of square and we're good to go. From there, we have either a short or long period of time, depending on the manufacturer, to go to that pre-engineering. And what to expect in pre-engineering is going line by line through everything that you asked for. And at this point, to me, again, to echo what Ricky's talking about, is you're going into detail now. You're not really changing much. You're just making sure the details are correct. So we go back to those lights, right? Making sure they're at the right angle, making sure, hey, we want this compartment or this shelf in this compartment at a foot from the bottom, not 18 inches, right? We're getting into those finite details now, not necessarily going and doing wholesale changes like we want different axles or the weights off or anything like that. Because again, that's where that money really comes from. And then depending on when you do your pre-engineering, it's a decent amount of time or a very, very, very long time until you get to that midpoint and final inspection. And again, at that point, the list is there, the playbook of how they're building this fire truck is done, and you're just going through that playbook to review to make sure that what you've asked for is there. And I think, this is the best time to hit that. You got to read the spec. I think we've kind of talked about that in some of our podcasts. I've heard Ricky talk about it before too. When we've had conversations, you got to read that spec. And if you're not doing it before sign contract, that's probably shame on you. If you're not doing it before pre-engineering, shame on you. If you're not doing it before midpoint or final, absolutely shame on you, because that's how they're building this fire truck and that's what they're building it to. So you should know what you're asking for before we get to this point of final inspection. And then again, that's you're kind of checking the boxes and taking your time, making sure that how you wanted this fire truck to look is the way it looks.
And I don't want to get us too far off track here, but don't look at the picture. Read the spec. Is that? Yes. I mean, that's pretty much the message you have been you've been delivering on your podcast. I think you say that on every podcast you host.
I don't. Between that and weight and the mission of the vehicle are like top three that I don't know that I can ever go out there and have a conversation and not even mention those. Right? Like they're just so crucial and they're so important and missed a lot.
So Ricky, as the purchaser here, is it the time frame that has really changed in the apparatus universe that has made you want to get everything buttoned up and nailed down so that there are absolutely no changes, or are there other factors that are also occurring in the apparatus purchasing arena that are making you say, there, and it's a little different for you, I think, because I mean, your specs at your department are pretty set. Like maybe where I'm at, we might change every time we buy a new one. Like where it's not going to be exactly the same. But is it really that time frame that it's just you're just looking at it and go, you better make sure you got it nailed down, because if you don't, the time it's going, it could send you back in line, and then like you were saying, and then it could be another 2 years. I mean, what is it that's changed that's making this so important to you right now?
I think it's just the time. So I mean, it's when I get there, I can't have any changes, because any kind of minute change now can impact your fire truck. Whereas like Nick's talking about angle of a light, that would have been a pebble in the road into a pre-engineering conference a couple years ago. Just, you want to change the light? Yeah, no problem. It's going to be, how much the light costs times 5 or, 1.5 or, whatever it is. No big deal. But now it's, oh my God, we got to go back through engineering. We're going to charge you this absorbent amount of money. Do you have the money in the truck? So I just want to go there. I want to be there a day. I want to be, and I say that because the more, because I'm always an advocate, and I think Nick and his dad and Tom are advocates of, always doing the engineering conference at the manufacturer, because then, but the problem when you go to the manufacturer is that, look at this truck. Look at this truck here. Look at the mirror on this. Look at that. Then everybody wants to make all these changes. Yeah, exactly. It's eye candy. You're like, oh man, I mean, this guy from the West Coast has got this option. I need that on my fire truck, but I can't tell anybody from the West Coast we're going to put it on a East Coast rig. But but then then people start seeing that stuff. So we want to spend a day going over that and look, to go back to something Nick was talking about, is that the importance of the salesperson is critical. I mean, is that the trust and the communication that you have with that person also takes a lot of the angst out of all this. So, I know that my salesperson is going to make my truck right. But I have that over years and years and years of purchasing, and millions of dollars. I mean, but if you're just a one-off customer, and that's not a bad thing, being hey, I'm just going to buy one rig this year, and then, another 15 years, I'll buy another one, is that how well does your salesperson know you, know your apparatus, know what you want? I mean, like Chris, you alluded to, is that I'm buying the same fire truck. My body's the same, all this sort of stuff. But what we got to watch out for is the running line changes that happen in the industry. So we have a scene light that we put on our fire trucks, and we love this scene light. It goes in a special little place, and it's worked all the time. And then the scene light manufacturer just decided, yep, we're not going to make that anymore. What do you mean you're not going to make it anymore? And it's all because of production. Is that I can't have too many things in production or designed, because somebody will choose it, and then I don't have that light. Maybe that light's just made for my department or 5 departments, and it's not a light that's well versed across the entire country. So that's a running line change. Or hey, we're not using this step light anymore. We're using that step light now. To you, Chris, in your department, if you order, it's not a big deal. If I order it, then it's a big deal because I got to have those on the shelf for when they break. I mean, look, nobody builds a solid bulletproof fire truck. I mean, everything's going to break, and God knows who made this light this week. That's going to be put on there. I think I know, but all these pieces just have to come into it. It's astonishing to me the little changes that we make now that were no big deal 3 or 4 years ago are monumental when we get to engineering now. It's like a crisis. We got to call an engineer in. What, really? You got to call an engineer for this? How much am I paying for this? And then you got to, Nick Luigi, you got to haggle with them over it. And, What do you mean? I feel bad for the one-off customer because, they're not as well versed as we are in that. I think that pays, a lot of, to have somebody like Nick or Nick's dad or Tom or somebody to go out with that person that's buying the first fire truck in 15 years. And God knows if you've had somebody on the committee that was on the committee 15 years ago, or had a relationship with the new salesperson or the new dealer or the new manufacturers, that they know how to operate the system. But Nick said it earlier, is that I don't know how the ops system operates every day because it changes every day. Mm-hmm. So I may have that 1.5 or 2 year wait, like Nick was talking about, but thank goodness my salesman is attentive enough to know that, hey, I went to a pre-engineering conference, I went to a delivery, I went to a midpoint on, customer X, and this is what's happening with them. That's going to affect you as my other customer. So, hey, I'm going to make a phone call. Hey, this is happening. And, so now we can kind of get ahead of it. So once again, in engineering, these bad things don't happen. So I could ramble on about this, and I know it's boring to some people, but I mean, it's every day. It's every day for me. I mean, that's my job, just like it is for Nick. So I ride the fire truck occasionally. So
yeah, I think the big thing too is time, right? The time for the committee. You have a 5 or 6 person committee. They need to be stood up for 5 years. So it's not like the old days, the volunteer or even career fire service where you're in a position for 2 or 3 years. You get a couple fire trucks under your belt, you're good to go. If you get in this position brand new, you could be speccing fire trucks, and it could be 3-4 years before you even see the first one come in. So, like Ricky, with a fleet that size, I mean, you could be ordering, 6 or 7 batches of engines and trucks and rescue squads. And by the time you actually even see what your work looks like, it's just coming in. And then on the other side, you're then taking over from the other person's stuff, whatever they were ordering. And now you're trying to figure out what they did and how you can change it. I mean, you're coming in the middle of something. So having somebody from the outside that can help you walk through the entire process, no matter who's on the committee, I think is kind of invaluable to an extent.
Yeah, I mean, especially for those littler customers. And once again, not being derogatory by that, just less volume, less the span of years between purchases is different. I mean, fleet customers, fleet managers, and stuff like that, they deal with it. Like Mark, obviously from when Mark was buying stuff in New York, I mean, every manufacturer knew him. It's kind of like knowing Eddie Rice. I mean, of course, manufacturers have a different name for Eddie Rice, but it's just you gotta have those relationships built, and I think that's a part that I talk about a lot when I deal with the customers, is that that salesperson that is a critical point for me, is that how well they operate for their manufacturer and how well they operate for me as the customer. Because I wrote in a slide for my FDIC presentation this year, is that the customer is no longer right. The customer is no longer the king, and no longer is the customer always right. It's just not going to happen. The manufacturer is the one that's right now, because at the end of the day, they'll tell you, I don't mean it in a mean way, is that, so look, I'm loyal to a manufacturer. We currently buy from this certain manufacturer. If I go, hey, look, I want to do this, this, and this, and they say no, and I'm like, well, that's a deal breaker. They're going to be upset for like 24 hours. And they'll be, I can't believe we lost this customer, blah, blah, blah. And then they'll get in there the next day and go, all right, that opens up 6 slots in the production line. so somebody else is going to benefit from that. So, Nick or somebody else is going to benefit from that going away.
Yep.
It's just not the same anymore. And I don't think it's the manufacturer's fault that they're like that. I think it's just the way the times that we're dealing with. So.
Well, as you can see, we've added Win Slauch here. He works closely with Nick on a lot of things. When we've been talking about, we went through just a review of the whole process. We talked about what Ricky and Nick mean by, having your rigs, ready to go by the time you get to the engineering conference. What we were just talking about is what has changed in the apparatus universe that's made it so important to ensure you've got everything squared away. I'd like to hear your opinion on that too. What has changed? Is it just the time that it takes to build the rigs now, or no? I shouldn't say the time it takes to build them, but the time it takes to deliver them now, or is it cost? What is it from your perspective that's changed that's made it so important to make sure that you're not changing anything when you get to the engineering conference?
Yeah, first, I apologize. I guess I can't read my calendar. I thought we were starting at 11:30. So, I think Ricky covered what changed, drastically is just the time frame. But and I wholeheartedly agree that at the point that you sign a contract, you want your fire truck to be essentially done, so that when you go to pre-engine, or at this point it's pre-construction, that you don't have to make changes. The only changes you're making are the ones that, again, like Ricky said, are based on the manufacturer changed the light or this or that, or what normally happens is, because it's pre-engineering, it is truly pre-engineering up until you sign that contract, is that it hasn't fully been vetted. The picture that you're looking at might not be the final print. Things might need to change here or there. The weight ratings might be off slightly. So again, those are the changes. You might get a list the first day you sit down at your pre-construction conference of questions from engineering. And it might be as simple as, hey, this light changed, you need to change it to this option number, things like that. Or it might be, hey, we need to, and this is something we ran into at work, and it sounds like Nick might have talked about a little bit, is, hey, when we did this, we were happy with the 48,000 pound axle, but now with some things that we figured out with no water, we got to go to a 52. So those are the things, and that's why it's important that you have as much of it done. And again, like Ricky said, especially with the one manufacturer, if you're 4 years down the road from the time you sign a contract, you've hit 3, 4, 5 price increases. So whatever changes you are going to make now are going to be multiplied by that much. Whereas 10, 15, 20 years ago, you could sign a contract and within the same year be at the pre-construction conference. So you could fix and manipulate and do anything that you really wanted to. You could say, oh, well, we're not sure about what we want on the pump panel, but we'll deal with that at pre-construction. Whereas now you can't do that, especially with one manufacturer. Now, I did at the Harrisburg Expo, I did go around and just try to get a time frame from most of the manufacturers. A lot of them are trying to do the pre-construction conference within 6 weeks of you signing a contract. Even though the build time is 2 to 3 years to 4 years, depending on the manufacturer, a majority of the manufacturers I talk to want to have that pre-construction conference done within 6 weeks. And there's a difference of opinion, whereas one is doing it within, maybe 18 months of the final construction. There's another one of the main manufacturers who is considering going that way. Again, trying to avoid cost increases and price changes. But again, if your manufacturer is going to go within 6 weeks of you signing the contract, you might have a little bit of lead time there to manipulate around that. Say, we're not 100% sure, but we want to sign a contract right now, and then we'll go and finish, whether you're trying to beat something with your fiscal year or things like that. So, but either way, I think it's very, very important to have that truck built as close to finalized as possible when you put pen to paper. That's the closest you're going to get to the price. That's, anything after that is going to be, a cost increase to some extent, especially if you're a 3 or 4 year, time frame away from that build time. And I guess a lot of the manufacturers say, why do you try to do it within that that quick time frame if your build time's so far down the road? And what are you doing with, the engineering changes or price changes because of different somebody changes the light or things like that. And they had a lot of good reasons. I think more of it's based on volunteer versus career. Whereas, if you're the committee now, your fire chief is designing this fire truck for one reason, for their thought process. And then all of a sudden, 3 years down the road, we've had a change in department politics. And now you have a different fire chief who wants something completely different. Well, they could go back and try to re-engineer the whole fire truck. Whereas at 6 weeks, it's still fresh in your mind. You know what you just did. You just spent the last 2, 3, 4 months, a year building this thing. So it's in your brain about what you did, why you did it. Whereas at 4 years down the road, again, it could be that complete regime change. You might forget completely what you did. And if you don't do a good job of reviewing your construction documents before you get out there, then you could be hit with surprises of why we do this. And again, if those same people aren't on the committee or they're not available to go out there, then it'd be like, well, I don't know why they did this, so let's do this instead. So, again, you want to, there's a couple different ways to look at that, and benefits, pluses and minuses, I guess, both ways.
I think something that you hit there that's pretty important too is that committee and the work put in before. And I kind of mentioned it a bit earlier, right? The amount of work that you need to do before pre-engineering, before signing the contract, and that all that quote unquote before time. What's really important though is, like, if you had to get a fire truck today, right? Like, we need a fire truck tomorrow. Obviously that's not going to happen, right? We want a fire truck 4 years from now. You're probably in a ballpark that might happen, but the time to start, like at College Park, perfect example, we have a 2017. We need to start today to get a committee together to start the conversation to hopefully sign a contract 6 months from now, right? So much has changed from 2017 to today that we have to go through and get the conversations going to where we want to go, right? Ladder complement, what we're going to carry, what's going on, chassis changes, different types of manufacturers, who we're going to go with. All those conversations need to happen. And so before you even get outside of the fire department to have conversations with manufacturers or sales forces, there's a lot that happens internally. You said a couple months, 2, 3 months, 6 months, even a year. Those are all legitimate timeframes for the work to happen. And again, you can't just go and say, hey, because we saw this with a client, was we go, hey, this is the manufacturer I want to go with. We get a couple drawings and they say, hey, price increase is coming up. And they said, okay, we're going to sign on the dotted line. We don't want to hit that price increase. We're done. Well, you don't even know what you're getting at that point, right? You didn't even have the conversations you need to have. So I think to take those pressures away, you need to really get a good idea of what you're looking for in a fire truck before you even reach out to those manufacturers and get the sales force involved. And again, Ricky's in a huge, way different situation. And so are we in Arlington. We're taking a picture of a fire truck of what we've done before, and we're just kind of refining it, right? And we're just making it a bit better, making those little bit of changes. It's a whole different ballgame when you're going fresh into a manufacturer to build a whole entire fire truck. It's a whole different ballgame.
I mean, it's all, I lay this at the manufacturer's feet also. I mean, this is, this 6 month, 18, there's a 6 month and then, 18-month engineering conference is interesting to me because, we talk about if we do it at 6 months, I think you said, who's going to be on the committee at the 18-month mark or the 2-year mark? And then what has changed in the industry in that short of time? I'm talking about one light. Imagine if I had done that at the 6 month mark, what is going to change in the next, 18 months before I go to engineering on the rig? And like Nick said earlier, this is every day. I mean, I have, 3 sets of batches of orders on, and it's usually my salesperson is calling me or emailing me, hey, this has changed, that's changed. And it's a constant battle. I mean, and for lack of a better term, I get paid for it. Imagine if I wasn't getting a dime, if I'm just a volunteer and I still got to work my regular job and then, have this salesperson bothering me every day. And I don't mean by bothering in a bad way again, is that, he's just trying to keep me abreast of the information because the information changes on a daily basis. I mean, I still don't think we have all good motor information in the world today, but what's happening. So, and how well that manufacturer is communicating. There are some manufacturers that communicate great, and there's some manufacturers that communicate, like Paul Revere. I expect to see lanterns hanging in the thing. He knows how well they communicate. It's just it. But everybody's buying from everybody manufacturer. I don't think any manufacturer is hurting for orders like they used to be. Now it's just and believe me, I think all manufacturers would much rather go. You can choose 5 pumpers. Pick which pumper you want. That's the one you're getting. That'll get rid of this backlog. So.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the manufacturing process, right? And the speccing. We were just I was just in Massachusetts doing training up there, and the last engine they got was a show floor, or 2 engines ago they got was a show floor model. Problem is they have a height, weight every restriction you can think of. They have a 10-foot bays to fit a ladder truck in, and then they have an angle of approach and departure issue. As soon as you pull out of the firehouse, they have a steep drop off where the butt end of the truck comes up towards the bay. So they have to have a really small profile ladder truck. And then on top of that, below it's a basement that they had to shore up just to get the ladder truck that they have in there. So, some departments don't have an option not to spec a fire truck, but you're 100% right? Like at the end of the day, hey, if you have the, 15-foot bay, 12-foot bay, 12 by 12 bay door with unlimited room, here's the fire truck you're going to get. You get the rescue engine style, the engine style, the engine rescue style, and that's it. Those are your 3 choices. Have a good day. And some manufacturers are heading that way a little bit. And then others are letting you customize. But again, you're paying for it in the price check, and you're paying for it in time as well to get the fire truck.
I mean, I think in the last couple of years, I've never heard the word no so much at an engineering conference. Nope, you're not going to do that. And, in our manufacturer, I know Nick and you guys know this, is that, look, if a manufacturer doesn't want to do it, they're going to charge you. They're going to throw you the I don't want to do it price. Mm-hmm. And, of course, then there's always that customer that goes, oh, yeah, I still want to do it. And then what's that going to look like for your delivery time,
Oh, yeah.
And, I'm always amazed at the manufacturing process, and I know there's probably a word for it. You go to college for it. And if either one of you two know it, please let me know what it is, because I always talk about it, never know the word for it. But just to figure out the process. I mean, when do you order ground lights? When do you order motors? When do you order the aluminum or the steel for the ladder? When all that sort of stuff kind of comes into play, and how modern that has to be in all manufacturers. It's got to be. I mean, we did a rig in PA, and in the middle of the build, the hydraulic manufacturer stopped building the hydraulics. No, we're not going to build those valves anymore. We're not going to build this system. I'm like, oh my God, can you imagine being the manufacturer? I mean, just what do you do at that point? I don't know what to tell you. I mean, nobody builds their own. Nobody's seeing their own hydraulic valves.
That was like the air horns, right? The air horn was like Friday at 5 p.m. They're like, yeah, we're not making this type of air horn anymore. Have a good weekend. Are you kidding me? Like, I got like 2,000 of them coming next week. Oh no, they're not coming anymore. It's like, wow, like what do you do then, right? Because no one has this, backlog of stuff that they can just ship out on a moment's notice. So you're right, like.
I think a little bit, you talked about logistics there, Ricky, about, when do we buy this? When do we do that? And then a little bit about customization too. Recently, I've seen where vendors they'll only bid one type of product. They only offer this type of valve. They don't offer this type of light, or if they do, we're going to have to charge you a whole bunch of money. And what they're doing is, I think obviously there's one company that's rather large. They're using the buying power of a bigger company. And that's the only, since they have so much of that product, that's all they want to offer you. They don't, it could be in our spec, this is an automatic no, or, non-negotiable is we want this type of valve, and we don't offer that type of valve. So we'll take an exception, and this is what we offer. It meets the
spirit
qualifications, or what you're looking for the valve. But again, there's reasons that people request a type of valve, whether it's maintenance, whether it's continuity through the fleet or whatever. And then all of a sudden you get, well, we're not going to give that to you. We don't care. So again, that's that, manufacturers trying to downsize that customization part. And then also on the back end, trying to limit their or utilize their buying power to buy a bunch of stuff and then only offer that to you. So I think that's, again, that's part of the downside of where we are in the fire apparatus manufacturing process at this point, that you're losing some of that ability. And again, that customer's always right part is entirely out their window at this point. And it seems like they're going to build a fire truck that they want to build and not necessarily a fire truck that you want them to build.
I mean, and I'd be a hypocrite because, to bash the manufacturers, because even our own organization, we're doing that. We're slowly chopping down the customization that you can do, because, I have to fix it all. So, so I can't go beat up the manufacturer going, you guys can't limit me on this stuff because, I need this for my fire department, and okay, you're a 5 truck or 7 truck order for the year out of 1,000, so, we're not going to cater to you nearly as much as we used to. And once again, I'm not beating them up. I think I'm just using plain language, for is that this is the reality of our world now is that, where, my manufacturer, if I said, hey, I wanted a widget mounted upside down, pink, and with, 7 ports on it. Oh yeah, man, we'll get that to you tomorrow. Ready to stroke us a check. And they're like, there's no way we're doing that. You're just not going to get it. So, I think that's why we see the big dealerships now, regardless of manufacturer. I would say the stock program from the dealers is unprecedented. When you can go to a dealer's page and see, 7 or 8 pumpers, a couple aerials and stuff like that, I'm like, oh my God, what time and money that these dealers must be putting. Can you imagine just writing, as a dealer, I'm going to buy 7 pumpers? That's an event for me, let alone just somebody that's.
Well, that's the ones they're showing. That's the ones they're showing. They got probably 22, 25, 30 tied up in the next, 3-4 years that they're getting ready to release as well. The one page I saw was like a couple rescue engines, a couple pumpers, different tank sizes, probably 12, 15 rigs from this one manufacturer, one dealer, dealership. And, some of them are out to 25 delivery, and you're like, this is insane. You're still, even on a stock rig, you're still looking at 1.5 years, delivery time, and they're selling them. They're selling them like hotcakes.
There is no doubt. No doubt they're selling them. And I think people are willing to give that up and give up customization for delivery. So
one thing I wanted to talk to you guys about, because you've mentioned it a number of times, we've been talking, we've been talking about the timing and all that kind of stuff. But one of the things that you've brought up several times, we've heard about writing checks. We've heard about you change this, and you would expect it to reduce your cost, but actually you're going to still end up owing money. And some of these other changes are costing you. And so early on, well, Ricky, you said in the beginning, if you have the budget, go buy it now.
Yeah.
Nick said way in the beginning, before we even start talking pre-construction or anything like that, you have to set your budget. Now, I'm just gonna lob this out to all 3 of you, but Nick and Win, you're both consulting an awful lot. Ricky, you also are consulting, but you're also doing a lot of the buying. What are you recommending to people to compensate for that? Are you recommending like a slush fund in the budget for X amount of dollars? Ricky, are you budgeting that into your purchasing agreement? Are you telling the manufacturers, hey, we've got a little chunk of money over here just in case things go astray? What are you guys doing?
Yeah, so obviously the salesman's going to know, but we do a lot of our stuff, the prepayment, but that's because we trust our manufacturer. So I know that when I prepay this, and Nick can probably speak about this better than I could, because we get a performance bond, but what really is that piece of paper going to do me at the end when I get it and it's not right? So we prepay the money, and obviously we get a rebate back for that. By giving them the money ahead of time, but it's because I trust my manufacturer. It all depends on who you are, what fire department you are, and what rig you're buying, is that how much you trust that. Obviously there's a couple manufacturers, you go through some of the horror stories, and, I don't know if it's because of their own way they do production or the way they do business, or it was the economy, or it was, supply chain issues. The horror stories of, asking for all this extra money is, it is crazy to me, and I don't have that built into my fire truck. So, yeah, so we'll have, I call it a bank. I'm sure Nick and, those guys have a different name for it. Is that, yeah, this is the contract price. I mean, this is what the fire truck's going to cost you from a salesman. Like, all right, man, add $10,000, add $15,000 onto that. That'll get me 3 lights, maybe. Nowadays, I don't know, but add that on there, and then I'm going to have my prepayment also available to me at that time. Also, as we get to the end of the rig, as we get through engineering, as we get through final. All right, so I've used my bank, and maybe I've used a little bit of my prepayment, and then I have all this extra money left over, and I count on that for buying equipment or buying. For me as a fleet customer, I buy bumpers, I buy radiators, I buy window cranks, I buy windshields and stuff like that with that money. So we can keep our in service time down. That's our big deal is in service time is out of service times are not good. We need to have it on the shelf because it's not like I can call any manufacturer, regardless of who they are, and go, hey, I need a bumper from my 2019 engine. Get it out here tomorrow. That's just not. That's not happening. So, you got to have that stuff in stock, and that's what we do a lot. And yeah, you got to have that extra money in it because I think Nick said it is that, did you have the money in there to get the angle changed? I mean, if you didn't think about that, you're going to get the same angle light that you had on your 2017 rig, just
or no light at all.
Yeah. I mean, no matter how well you can articulate to the lady at your department who writes the checks, how important this is. She's going to go, yeah, there's no budget for that. You said you needed a light. I got you a light. What angle? That's on you. So, yeah, I mean, obviously I'm sure these two can talk about what they do with their customers or, with their departments. So.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things we used to do at work is you would spec more expensive products in there, an independent front suspension, a more expensive headsets. And then when you got to pre-construction, you would cut all that out. And that would be where your slush from would come from. Because again, you're signing a contract based on one price, and then whatever, you manipulate that price. But today you can't do that. So I 100% recommend that you build a contingency of at least 3 to 5%. 5% on $1 million, $2 million now it's when you were paying $600,000 for a fire truck or 400, you could say 5%. It wasn't that big a deal. Now, when you say 5%, that's like, all right, well, let's maybe tone it down a little bit and let's go 3%, so that you have the ability to make some changes when, like Ricky said, we do push going to the manufacturer for the pre-construction conference. But again, when you go there, there's always going to be that, I like that. But it also gives you the abilities. Well, I'm not 100% sure, where these steps need to go. So we can go out there and we can try it out. So it gives you a little bit of leeway one way or another if you, play it cautiously and say, listen, we're not going out there and making every change just because, we've seen this, and this. But I think that you have to go with some sort of contingency, again, especially with those big, long build times, for the simple fact that light might change. And it, again, it's not necessarily the manufacturer's part that the light changed, and they may or may not be able to pass that call. Maybe they can eat that, maybe they can't. It just depends. So you have to be able to have that in your budget to make those changes. So again, you want to go with that little bit of contingency. And, I think we talked a little bit, everybody wants a fixed price contract, and nobody's going to give you a fixed price contract anymore. There's always a little passage in there that says because of this, or if the motor changes, we're going to have to do this to you. We're going to have to add on to it. And, you can look at that kind of two ways. There was stories a couple of years ago about one manufacturer and coming back and asking for large amounts of money. Other manufacturers didn't have to do that, but it just makes you kind of wonder, like, well, this manufacturer didn't have to ask for a bunch of money. This one had to ask for a bunch of money. So at least these guys said, hey, listen, we gave you what we thought was the price of the fire truck when we get it. Over this cost, this time period, these changed and we can't afford to build this truck anymore. Whereas these guys just said, hey, this is the cost of the fire truck. Again, that cost could have come down pretty drastically from what they charged you. They're not giving you that money back. That money's not coming back to you. So there's kind of two ways to look at that. It's good and bad one way or the other, right? It's hard to tell who to believe and trust in those situations. But again, it's just through that. And like Ricky said, if you're going to prepay, we 100% recommend that you get that performance bond. That's something that you're paying for. But again, it's really important to pay attention to what that percentage of that performance bond is too. Normal's like $3 or $4 on every $1,000. If somebody's charging you $50, $60 per $1,000 for a performance bond, you really want to question whether you want them building that fire truck. And Ricky's right. If they come back and say, hey, we need more money, you really can't pull that performance bond on them in that case. But if you get to final inspection, it's overweight, it doesn't meet this issue or this, or something's drastically wrong with it, then that's your kind of insurance for that prepayment. And again, that prepayment does give you some money with the interest that they're going to pay you back on it. So you want to have those conversations with the dealer on what you think, your salesman and the dealer, like, what do you need? What are you going to get back based on what you're paying up front, things like that, to build that into your contingency fund.
I think too, with the department that, we talk about municipality and Arlington and Prince George's and, these bigger companies buying, and you go back down to the quote unquote little guy, right? That whether it's volunteer or career department buying that one fire truck every 10 years, and it becomes even more difficult because at least now with every purchase that we make, our municipalities understand the process, understand the changes, because little by little they're getting them. We've gone to places that they haven't bought a fire truck since before 2010. So they don't even have the latest or the last round of emission updates, let alone now. And the trust, the manufacturing industry, so many things have gone way upside down. And you go in this municipality and you try explaining the market, and they're just sitting there drowning because the 10 minutes that you've been talking, they're just lost. Like, so you're telling me that the fire truck that we paid $450,000 for is now $1.5 million, and it's going to be years to get it. Like, and then what do we do in the meantime, right? So now they're trying to work the budget to even get that money that we're talking about, let alone above that to make any changes or do anything, crazy. And I think that's why that stock program is so popular, because there's no extra money in there. You're just signing a price and it's done. And you look at just people in general and time, and, Ricky said, I'm getting paid for this job, right, to do the job. Mm-hmm. And I could imagine someone not getting paid. You look at the amount of time it's going to take to be good at this. And I looked at a fire chief this weekend, and I said, just the book of NFPA 1900, 1910 alone, to go thumb through it and understand that, let alone industry best practices, let alone each different manufacturer and how they do things, you're going to be 6 months trying to just get to a point where you can go and sit down and have an actual conversation with the manufacturer. And then from there, it's trying to understand your first due and what you need, and, NFPA 1500 and what the health and safety factors are. What should we be putting on the interior of the fire truck versus the exterior? You start drawing all these things out, and it all costs time and money. And everybody in today's world is crunched for money. So they're working overtime. The fire industry on the career and volunteer side, there's just less people available. So that means that there's less people to do the work. And it goes back on the same general people to do that work. And so we're really at a point now where that, like we talked about, the speccing is kind of going away because there's not a lot of knowledge. There's not a lot of time to do it. And the money implications that, we can save or spend are kind of going away. So, we've seen it time and time again. The fire truck backs in, and it's the fire truck you're going to get, and make it work. Good luck.
So to bring it back around again to where we were in the beginning, is getting it right. The importance of getting it right. We've talked about all these different factors that can happen from not getting it right. But originally we were talking about getting this right, getting it all buttoned up, getting it nailed down. This is the truck. We're, not like Ricky said, I don't want any changes. I want to be out there. I want to spend a day, and I want to come home. So what are the answers, if there are any? What advice do you guys have for people? Is it simply, I'm just thinking of the volunteer side of things and how it goes sometimes, where you've got 10 to 15 people on the committee. Is it, reducing the number of voices you have so that there aren't so many changes down the line? You're like, what do you guys have to say that, like, hey, here's what we suggest?
You can't have an idiot on the committee. That's
yeah. I would say the first thing is get a vehicle, and whatever that vehicle can hold, that's the max amount of people that could be on the committee, right? And there's two reasons for that. One, too many voices, right? The other thing, make it an odd number. Shouldn't be an even number, because you're going to get the half and half argument. Make it an odd number. So 5, 7, I think is probably max 5 is a pretty good number, because again, you want to divide that work up. But get in that vehicle and drive. There are people that have bought new fire trucks around you, no matter where you are. Get in that vehicle and drive. Get on all the social media platforms. Look, make phone calls. You should not be starting from scratch in today's day and age. Somebody out there has done something that could work for you, right? Whether it's a manufacturer, whatever. You could take X manufacturer spec of a fire truck and bring it to Y manufacturer, because that's the one that's going to work for you, and still make that fire truck work. It doesn't have to be the same manufacturer per se. Obviously, that's preferred. It's an easier thing to do. But get in that vehicle and drive, and go see those fire trucks. Have those conversations early, and then drive your area to see what you need in your area. See what your neighbors have. And then that's the starting point. And that takes away a lot of work. People start with this blank piece of paper, and it gets very overwhelming very quickly. So I think that's a very a solid piece of advice to just get started, right? Way less overwhelming. You have 5 or 6 drawings of fire trucks that you like. Now we start making decisions from there. And then it makes that process. Okay, go to the manufacturer. This is generally what I want. Okay. And then we're going to fine tune from there. And we can it just streamlines a lot of it. It takes a lot of that effort out, because somebody somewhere has done it. You're not going to do anything novel or new. And the manufacturer is not going to say yes anyway. So get that out of your head right now. Find a fire truck that works, that somebody's built already, and use that as your template moving forward. That's probably the best advice I could give.
I mean, it's reasonable expectations. I mean, you can't look. We all work with firefighters that are not reasonable, and having one of those on the committee is just going to make things worse. I mean, if you as a person cannot understand what the country's going through or the manufacturers are going through, you shouldn't be on the committee. Because look, no manufacturer wants to go through this hardship. I don't care which manufacturer it is. So I mean, but they don't want to go through all the the hardships that they've been going through. So if you don't have, I mean, you don't have to be fully sympathetic to their problem, but you have to understand that, yeah, I mean, a $1 million fire truck or a $2 million ladder truck to you as an organization, like we saying, if you're that buying one every 10 years, that's the huge commitment. We're spending $1 million, we're spending $2 million to a manufacturer. That's nothing. I mean, I got 50 of those on order. You're not unique anymore. There's. You used to be able to say, well, I'm from the XYZ fire company, and, people, bow down. I mean, Mark even said it, Chris, a couple of months ago before he retired. He goes, FDNY used to be able to say, FDNY wants it that way. And the manufacturers would bow down and do it. And they're not doing that anymore. So just get over it. So build the fire truck that's going to work for you, and don't expect you're going to get everything that you want. So.
Take your fire truck somewhere else. I don't even want them. Yeah. That's going to push my lead time back farther.
And I think the one thing Nick kind of alluded to it is you have to do the work, and you have to do the work through the whole process. Not only getting to the start of where you want to be, but every time that spec comes back with the change in it, the component list, the written spec, you have to read the entire thing. You have to understand how every switch, everything's going to work, because if you do the work up front, then when you get to that pre-construction conference, that's what's going to allow you to do that one-day pre-construction conference. If you're laying shelves and compartments out, especially in a rescue or a ladder truck, like, make sure you know where that stuff's going to go before you go sit, there to talk about it. That's one of the most frustrating things is, oh yeah, we're good, we know. And then you go and you sit there for 2 hours while they argue over one compartment about where the shelves are going to line up and what's going to go in there and what measurement that piece of equipment is. You should have had that done long before we got to that point. And that's what you said. Oh, you're calling back to the firehouse. I need you to go out here and measure this for me. It's such a pain. Whereas if you just did the work up front, it makes it so much better. And it is hard. I mean, you're getting 180 pages of text that you need to read. As a volunteer, even as a paid, even for Ricky doing it as his job, that's very difficult to do on top of everything else that we all have to do, but you have to make the time to read that. And if if it's breaking parts of it up, hey, you read about the chassis, you read about the cab, you read about the body, and you be the expert on that for us. And that's the way you got to do it. But you have to have those experts in it. And, again, I think one way to really cut down your time and your hassle or your heartache is 5 to 7 people is where you want to be. If you're in that 10, 12, 15 person committee, just be ready for a headache. So
I'd like to add to that.
Do the work.
I'm sorry when I interrupted you.
I said, do the work.
I'd like to add to that, and I mean, you guys are the experts. I'm just the moderator here, but it seems, but it was funny.
I think Ricky's got something to say.
I think a little bit of discipline goes a long way as well, and what made me think of that was when Ricky said earlier, you get to the engineering conference and then you're walking around the floor. And you're seeing all these things that all these other fire departments are doing. And suddenly it's like, oh, I want that one. I want that one. I want that. Oh, that's new. That's really cool. There is, you got to be disciplined about it and go, you know what? Maybe on the next one, yeah, that's really cool. But maybe we need to wait. If we start really screwing around with things now, it's only going to impact us in negative ways, possibly cost wise. And also, time to delivery wise. So I do think there's a bit of discipline that you need to exercise as well.
Yeah, and one way, I don't know if Ricky's trying to talk. He's muted.
Ricky, we lost you.
No, I'm here. It's my fault. There was a call going out in the background I was listening to. I didn't want to. I'm the one that you have to discipline because, I go out to a plant and I see a West Coast fire truck with wooden ground ladders on it. I feel like I should have those because those are the nicest. Because Ricky doesn't have to throw them anymore, but they look cool, So I'm like, I'm the one that has to be disciplined. But when we talk about, I'm sure what happens with Nick and everybody's that, and with me is that I buy them a new rig, and then they scratch it. I'm upset. I'm upset, and I don't think the field realizes we got 4.5 years in this thing. This is 4 years of our lives that we put into that, the rig going, like you say, like we're saying, going over every switch, going over every shelf, going over every bolt, every light, and responding to all these emails. And I'm sure I was the same way when I was riding the rigs in Fairfax. It was like, throw me a rig, I'm going to ride it. It's not a big deal. And a scratch it, they're going to give me another one. It's not, it's not a big deal. But a lot of time goes into these rigs, and the people that do it, are putting a lot of time and effort into each one of these rigs, regardless if it's me as the manager or the employee team that goes out there. They're taking time away from their lives to get that rig right. And, I think Nick and we've all talked about, how important that is and all that documentation. So.
All right, guys. Well, we have covered a tremendous amount of ground here, I think, today. The conversation was great. The less I have to talk and the more you guys talk, the better these things go. So this has been perfect today. I want to thank Nick and Win and Ricky again for joining me today. If you have any follow-up questions that maybe we didn't hit on today, let me know. chris.mcloone@clarionevents.com. I'll get it out to them. We'll get you an answer. We might have a whole new podcast on just your question alone. So please make sure you send them in. If you would like to see previous podcasts or listen to previous podcasts, they're all archived on fireapparatus.com. Just have to add one word to that, though. It's fireapparatusmagazine.com/podcasts, and you can see everything that we've done up to this point. So again, my thanks to Nick, Win, and Ricky today. This has been Chris Mc Loone for Fire Apparatus and Emergency Equipment. Have a good one and stay safe. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you.